debating, interviewing. You know that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all roomy up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
Hello again. I've been abandoned by my co-hosts again, so I brought in the wrecking crew here, Collin and Kent again. What's up, guys?
Hey, things are good. How about you?
Not bad. Start the day off with a couple of urgent things to take care of, and that's not my favorite way to start the day, but you write software for a living. That stuff's going to happen. This was an interesting week. We had Rails 7.2 come out. Was it Wednesday? I was like, I have absolutely no idea.
Pretty sure it was Wednesday.
I thought we should run through the release notes for it because there's some great stuff in there. Major features, and there's a lot of them. Development containers, which is awesome. Dev containers. This actually got an upgrade as well because I think it used to just be a flag when you did Rails new, but now you can run Rails dev container on an existing app and it will apply that to there and look at your database configuration and stuff. So if it needs Postgres, then it can detect that and add the client, whatever, which is sweet. The browser version guard, which I remember being talked about like a long time ago. I forgot when David first made that PR. That shipped in Rails 7.2, caused us a little strife this week as well, which led to a Rails contribution. And I just made a screencast walking through the whole process of finding that bug, fixing it, making a pull request, Raphael taking care of my missing test, and that sort of thing. So that'll be a really good screencast if anybody wants to look out for that. Collin, you want to explain what happened?
Yep. So there's a new default. There's a line now that ships in the new Rails version application controller.
Allow browser versions modern.
Right. Yeah. That modern option, right? That's what you pass to it, right? The symbol modern.
Mm-hmm.
It basically says that we're only going to allow browsers that support, these certain features, which I believe they have listed above that line in like a comment, right?
It's stuff like WebP, images, web push, badges, import maps, native import maps without the polyfill. That's the word I was looking for. Yep. And also ones that support like CSS nesting, which was like the main reason I used Sass and stuff back in the day, but also like the Collin has selector as well.
You had merged or updated Jumpstart to that, and I had merged Jumpstart into GoRails now that we have GoRails on Jumpstart.
And we figured like people won't need to upgrade themselves. We will do it and test it and make it ready for you. We haven't made it a new release of Jumpstart yet, but if anybody's ambitious and wants to ride along on the bleeding edge with us, come on in, the water's warm.
Yeah, because I mean, that's exactly how we hit this, because I wanted to merge that Jumpstart update into GoRails and get it deployed so that we could be testing that in production. We did that, and then apparently we have a decent number of folks that access GoRails from browsers that I guess fall out of that range of modern there. So we got a bunch of, shout out Honeybadger, notifications coming through, all of a sudden a big barrage of them, and then we quickly tracked it down. So that, thankfully, I think I forget what the error said, but it like as soon as I saw it, I knew. It
said, because the way that controller is written, it like knows to render a file or something like in the public folder. So it was like specifically mentioning that file name, which made it easy to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. So that file, it's a 406 unsupported browser.html, right? Is that, I think something like that.
Yes, in the file? I believe so.
So that's how we then learned that in the new version of Rails, it's going to ship with that file. We missed that in the update, and you can go like find that file in the Rails source. If you go look it's in like the generators, Rails templates folder somewhere in the public.
If you search that 406, I'm sure you'll find it.
I'm guessing that's what you did, is just went and copied it and threw it in there.
Yeah, that fixed it temporarily. Fixed it permanently, but was just kind of just a patch for ourselves.
Right. So then I went and commented out that line because we didn't want to enforce that right now. So we're rolling without that, but it's there for whenever, we do want to. But yeah, so that's how we ended up encountering that issue, which led to you making that pull request for that change to I'll let you talk about what it does.
I mean, first we should talk about like our initial thoughts. We like fix it in GoRails, fix it in Jumpstart, and then we were talking about, should this be a documentation change somewhere?
Oh, right.
But the more we got thinking about it, it was like, basically this new allow browser feature for any Rails application that's being updated will just never work. And every one of those people upgrading their apps will run into this if they ever turn this feature on. And really, it makes more sense to be like fixed in Rails itself, which, like I talk about in my screencast, like if you want to get involved in Rails, this is the time. It's so easy to find bugs like this and then find an issue and then make a pull request that makes sense, because there's a bunch of different options for this. You could update the docs. You could update the code. If you update the code, how should that thing work? Should it only create new files? Should it redo the whole directory? The config environments directory is kind of done or whatever, or like the bin stubs directory. So you have more opportunity to contribute to Rails when you're like first person using the beta or whatever. You could run straight off main if you wanted, or the like Rails 7.2 stable branch. But when it comes to stuff like this, if you really want to get involved in Rails, these are easy places. Like anything new that comes out will have lots of rough edges, and it's a great way to jump in. So yeah, we were talking about it and was like, actually, should just update the app update command and make that happen. And I go through all like the details of that and debugging and learning the Rails source code, because I'd never looked at that before in Rails. And I happen to be very familiar with it because I was playing with the generator stuff a couple weeks ago. Let's see, the plugin generator command is very similar as well to the app generator command. So I had spent some time understanding that better a couple weeks ago and added like Rubocop. And what was the other one? What was the other change I made to the plugins? It's not dev containers, but it's, GitHub Actions.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It'll generate a GitHub Actions example for you, just like your Rails new does, but for anybody developing plugins. So that was cool. I had done that recently, but taught me a bunch of this stuff. So it was really easy for me to jump in and like fix the app update command. And then Raphael took care of writing a test for me. I asked roughly, or I don't know if I asked or whatever, but we did look and try and find, is there an app update command test file? But we didn't find it. So we weren't really sure and just wanted to like push up the PR as is to see like, is this even going to be the right direction or not? I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to do something for a PR that may not be accepted. So I was like, might as well just push it up there and see what happens. Raphael or somebody will tell me where to go find a test. Or as it turned out, he just wrote the test real quick because it was basically, a one-liner, run the generator, run the app update command after you deleted that file. So if it's missing, make sure it exists now. So it was an easy, simple test, but thought it was a great example of that, like trying to hit that fine line of, do I spend a ton of time on this or do I not? That's a hard thing to hit sometimes. But yeah, that was pretty cool. So keep an eye out for that screencast. What else we got here? Make Ruby 3.1 the new minimum version. That's pretty good.
I think we'll touch on that one in a second, or this one in a second too. But you briefly mentioned how now they give you like a default action, GitHub action that you can run.
Oh yeah, I guess that's not been in Rails 7.1, huh? That was new in.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, 2.6, add GitHub CI workflow to default new applications. I mean, that's been super nice just to have you create a new app and then all of a sudden you have your test suite running. It's just convenient. Skipping back a couple, default progressive web application files. So you'll have a couple routes and your PWAs and service worker stuff is there ready to go for you. So that's stuff that I think came out of building Campfire that's now built in, which is excellent. We're standard RB fans, but this is also the one that adds the Omakase Rubocop rules finally in this release. I feel like some of the stuff has lived in I've known about it for many, many months, but it's been in main for a long, long time. And I feel like some of these are like, oh yeah, we've had that for a while, but no, actually.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we do in Jumpstart Pro, though. Like we keep an eye on what's happening in Rails main and start testing that stuff in Jumpstart early so that the GitHub Action stuff, we're already good to go. We've already had that. We've added Brakeman, which is the next bullet here, that Brakeman is added by default to new applications, which is great. I imagine that's also run in the CI as well. Check for vulnerabilities and stuff. We've done that for many years on Jumpstart. I don't think it was always enabled by default, but now that Rails does it, we do too, I believe. Those are all like really good quality of life things.
For sure. And literally 10 seconds ago, did you see Raphael just released 7.2.0 beta 1?
No. Isn't that the same though?
I don't know. It's got your commit in there under the rail ties section. Because it was just 7.2 beta 1. He tacked on the 0.0, I believe.
Not on Ruby Gems.
Well, I just got an email about it.
Interesting.
Pre-release V7.2.0 beta 1.
I mean, I think that is probably just he created the release on GitHub then.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Even though it was like officially released, 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
That's probably, 7 minutes ago. He made it a release on GitHub, not, this isn't a beta 2 yet. So my fix won't be in there.
It is in there.
Or he generated this and it's not quite accurate then, if that's the case. Because, it wasn't re-released on Ruby Gems, so it wouldn't be in there. So it's not in there. Just maybe mentioned in the, I don't see my name in that 7.2 beta 1, so it's not in there.
It's
I don't know what you're smoking over there,
dude,
but must be good stuff.
I'll have a No.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long they'll wait for. Sometimes the betas lasted for like a long time, but I feel like this one's fairly polished. And that's not the fix from yesterday or whatever.
Oh, damn, I didn't even read the bullet point.
That's the GitHub and Rubocop actions for plugins. Yeah, that one was in there 2 weeks ago or whatever. So that is in there for sure, but not the app update fix.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll have 2 in this release.
There you go.
But
actually, our boy Steve Polito's got one too in here too.
Yeah, one of the ones that Steve did. Maybe it's truncated this for me or something. I don't. Yes, it is. Read more. That's why I couldn't find myself. One of them, Steve put the default URL options in. He's got 4 right here in a row. Updates a node version to 20.11.1. So that's interesting. I think it just says 20.14 already. I checked this week earlier, updating Jumpstart. One of the cool things, though, is the changes he did was the default URL options config is now added to development and test in your environments, which is awesome. So you have like a place to start with that, because I always had to Google it because I couldn't ever remember where that came from or whatever. And so that was a huge quality of life thing. Doesn't really affect any functionality, but it sure makes life easier when you're like, actually, I need to use like .local or .dev or LVHme or something for subdomains. Like it's perfect for that kind of stuff. It makes it really easy to do. A tiny thing that I really, 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 really like is that Stan changed the Rails console prompt to show the environment and your application name, which is Ace. I really love that.
I didn't notice that at first. And then as I was like working on merging in Jumpstart into GoRails, I did something in the console. I was like, wait a second, something's different here. And then it hit me. Yeah, that one.
Did you also notice the colors are configured for red in production and blue for test and development? I don't know if you have a staging one. I don't know if it's just blue or whatever, but nice to see red for production just to keep you subtly aware that you might be doing dangerous things. That's pretty great. What else is on that release list? You got me off track here. There's been a lot of changes, man.
Yeah.
This is all stuff since last Rails World, right? Last September? because that's when the last Rails release came out. New Puma default for thread count changed the number of threads from 5 to 3 due to the nature of well-optimized Rails applications with quick SQL queries and slow third-party calls running via gerbs. Ruby can spend a significant amount of time waiting for the global VM lock, GVL, to release when the thread count is too high, which is hurting latency. So they've dropped it down to 3 for a good balance of concurrency and performance, which is awesome. I like that. It's something you will probably tune at some point, but a good default that hits your standard dynos, maybe your 2 or 4 gig of RAM servers on DigitalOcean or Hetzner or whatever else. You can do this and then you can monitor it and stuff if you need, or if you have enough CPUs or whatever to do that. But that's more for workers, even with more CPUs. Having 3 threads per process, probably a good default there. This one's cool. Preventing jobs from being scheduled within transactions. We literally had someone just ask about this on the Notice gem, where we create a transaction to insert all the events and recipients to the database. And then that transaction needs to actually save the thing to the database before we queue up the job to process all of that. And that's a common thing where you're like, oh, I want to insert or queue up the job after this is inserted. Well, you could queue up the job and then later on the transaction could fail and get rolled back. Your job would still be queued up and then have nothing to go run against. Or it could be queued up too fast and then the job runs and it's like, hey, that thing doesn't exist yet because it doesn't have an ID. And so this somehow just captures those and queues them up to be done at the end of the transaction block automatically for you to save you that very common pitfall. I feel like I've done that a million times and then realized, oh, that doesn't make sense. But I think we all have probably at some point. So that's cool. I like that a lot, which I believe rolls into the next one, which allows you to add after commit blocks to, assuming that's how this works, is it defines an after commit block on the current transaction that you're inside of. But you can add your own if you want. So you can say like, hey, after commit, we want to take this article and send you an email, which is basically how the stuff works in Noticed. It would be cool if we could actually take advantage of this stuff, but then we would be stuck to Rails 7.2 as a minimum version for Noticed. Mm-hmm. So maybe in the future, if we do that, then we can take advantage of it and refactor a bit. That was the same thing with insert all. Was that added in Rails 7.1 and not in 7.0 or something? Or it was 7.0 and we support 6.1 or something. But we have use insert all if it exists and then do it the lazy way in a transaction or something. Otherwise, because insert all, I was going to maybe backport the code for that. But if you ever had to do that and it's something like insert all that is like a big old class with quite a bit of stuff, it's not super fun to go do that stuff. So we just do a transaction, a bunch of inserts. If insert all is not a thing, detected feature or whatever in your Rails app. That's sort of the fun that you dig into when you're building gems, like plugins that could run in any Rails app versus your Rails app, where it's like, well, we know what version of Rails we're on. We know what features we can and cannot use because they either exist or they don't.
They don't.
And we have to do it whatever specific way. When you get to a gem, it's like, well, if we want to support everything, then we're stuck with the old ways always. YJIT, UJIT, default if running Ruby 3.3+, which is sweet.
Yeah.
Did I send you that commit? I believe we looked at it.
Yeah.
Which was sweet. It just kind of is set up in the right place as well. Because I think I saw it on Twitter. But the thing was, you can turn on YJIT from the very beginning of your Rails app, but this actually does it after initialize or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say after some of the boot stuff, right? Wasn't it John?
Yeah, basically after. Yeah, that's right. And he pointed out there's no sense in jitting the boot code that'll never be used again. So we can then skip it, delay it, and then only apply that to your application code that's generally running for every request or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's smart. Because in the past, I just enable YJIT equals 1 or whatever the environment variable is. And that's
let it go.
Fine. But I never even thought about that. It's going to probably be optimizing some of the stuff that doesn't really matter. And so it doesn't hurt you to just turn it on a little later, which is another cool thing of being able to control that from inside the Ruby process and toggle it instead of before Ruby begins. That's an excellent feature and like reasoning for that. Cause I never wondered, or I always wondered, like, why would you ever want to turn it on in the middle of your process? But this is a perfect example of why you would want to do that. Rails Guide's got a beautiful new update. John Athade, like, I remember seeing this a long time. It doesn't feel that new to me yet, but I can't wait till it ships and is like the default guide theme, because it is much better organized, much cleaner, easier to find stuff. Just a big improvement visually.
Yeah, and the sticky sidebar is amazing.
Yes. And it highlights where you're currently at and all that.
Yeah, that one's hands down like probably my favorite thing too. I think I heard another podcast. I don't remember which one. Somebody else was saying that's what they loved about it too. And for sure, it's awesome. It's something so small, but it's great.
Yeah, you say it's small, but I bet it took a good bit of work.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it did.
It feels small in the sense that it's like a visual update versus like new functionality and stuff, but it is a huge improvement.
Until now, observability was metrics, logs, and traces. It was reliability budgets, error rates, and latencies. It was big acronyms on a central dashboard. In short, it was what the ops team cared about, not the developers. But Honeybadger is changing that. Of course, you need the big picture, the single pane of glass that lets you know what your system is doing and that it's operating normally. But individual users matter too. User experience is more than just a line on a dashboard. Honeybadger's observability platform lets you drill down into the details, into the individual user experiences that drive product development and your business forward. It helps you understand your product and your users as much as it does your systems and performance. Honeybadger's free developer plan includes error tracking, uptime monitoring, custom charts and dashboards, and 50 megabytes per day of structured event logging. To get started, visit honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
You ever see, there's a book that John wrote. It's an older book, but it's great. If anybody is interested in like that kind of stuff, can't recommend it enough. Great one. And word on the street is he's thinking about doing an updated version of that too, which
the Rails view component.
Watch out.
The Rails view partial.
Yeah.
J Malik is default in the Docker files now, which is sweet. That is an optimization we added for a long time in our Docker files and Jumpstart and stuff, which is great to see built in now. And we've actually switched our Docker file that was like custom to basically match the Rails one. I think it's almost exactly the same, except for maybe like adding Node and Yarn or whatever. They may have that as well if you enable JS bundling. Puma Dev was, I think, just a comment in bin setup, but that's mentioned here. It's not defined. No, it doesn't actually do anything. I think it's just a comment or whatever. Although I don't entirely know if there's Mac OS Linux support. I don't think there's like Windows support. It also hasn't gotten any commits since last year, February 2023. So like they are recommending Puma Dev, but I don't know if we're going to run into not recommending Puma Dev if it's kind of gotten abandoned or someone will have to hopefully take over and maintain it, but not sure there. We could dig into all the rest of things here. There's specific changes for Railties and the other frameworks in here, but I think a lot of these are kind of, we should skim them because they're sort of like, they've removed Oracle and SQL Server and JRuby specific adapters from Rails new and DB system change commands. Like not terribly exciting stuff, but hopefully helps like Rails core maintain less, because I'm sure that's been quite the pain. They removed Rails UJS, RIP, poor old UJS.
Or a little out.
Those are some days. I'm not going to say if they're good or bad days, but they were days. See anything else good in here?
I'm trying to skim through right now and see what else. There's a lot of removal stuff I see.
As we've been removing stuff for
it seems like it's
a
the
long time.
Theme of the year.
That is a good theme. I know I've heard rumblings of that, like them trying to slim down and focus on less stuff being helpful. No changes in Action Mailbox or Action Text. David announced that House MD Markdown editor. Very curious if it's going to be like, I have a feeling it won't be Action Text compatible. Like it might be its own separate thing because Action Text is very dependent on HTML inside the database. So don't quite know on that one. But yeah, rest of the stuff looks like pretty minimal things for the most part.
Definitely.
But the big news this week was that Rails is slow.
What?
What did you guys think about the old drama on Twitter?
Kent, I'll let you go if you want to go first.
I don't really know what was going on there. I just saw you mention it. So I did drop in on the stream for a few minutes. It was just sort of fun to see them going on and on about all the different Laravel, React, and Angular, and all these different things. And I was joking with you guys because whatever part I got in the stream, I was like, oh, make some good points. Maybe I should switch. But not really. But then it was just, I thought it was interesting to see all the different points of view. And I watched the whole stream though, so I didn't see it yet.
I don't know if I know exactly which tweet started it, but there was a guy who was like tweeting about Hayes calendar being slow and like clicking on new event, lazy loads a modal that like overlays and that like has the server generate it and stuff. And then he had turned on the 3G connection speed limit and it was like very slow, which is like, yeah, sure. Okay. Makes sense. I think Theo in his stream did that and did a VPN tunnel to Australia or something. And so it was super slow, but it was like, nobody's doing that. So that doesn't make sense. And also like they could have chose to write a stimulus controller to render the form with HTML client side, but they chose to do it lazy loaded from the back end. That was on purpose. And David had talked about on Twitter, like they're putting together, because you have to remember as well, they recently exited the cloud, which means that their servers are not going to be in Australia, or it sounded like they didn't even have servers in Europe at all. So they are going to be testing out a server in Amsterdam, it sounded like. And so it's like that alone is going to like speed up the latency and everything a ton. So that will be very helpful. The complexity is like, is their database also distributed? Because it isn't going to help a ton if you make a request to Amsterdam from the UK, but then it's the server in Amsterdam has to go talk to Chicago's data center for the database queries or something. So that's like a much more complicated thing when you start going that broad, especially when you went from AWS's whatever crazy bill they had to your own data center and stuff. So it's probably a symptom of that as well, that they left the cloud and how they have to recreate the cloud a bit to retain some of that speed. And it's like an important point that wasn't really brought up, I don't think, when they were proclaiming how great and cheap it is to leave the cloud. They have to now like rack their own servers and have a partner around the world who can do that for them. And then they still got to handle data replication and whatnot. Luckily, though, if you can do like a multi-master setup with your database, chances are your customers in Europe, if their data is actually kept in Europe, which it probably has to be for GDPR and other European nonsense, which is not a bad thing, but sometimes the cookie banners and things are a little ridiculous. But that is like another problem they have to now go solve, where they could have used a pre-built thing that's very expensive that already exists or whatever. So a lot of that conversation and whatever was just like complete nonsense, because it was like making a new calendar event is a second slower than it might be on Google Calendar, but how many times are you actually like moving or creating stuff on your calendar? Not that often. That is the rare part. You're reading the calendar, and that is the thing that you interact with the most. So they invested the time into that. That's what they were doing. It's a business trade-off. It's not a developer, a user experience trade-off. You're building a brand new product. That's how this goes. You could build it perfect and speedy everywhere from day one, but then you might not be able to sell the damn thing, and you just spent $5 million building this thing nobody wants. So to me, this whole argument was glossing over everything that actually mattered in the conversation. But they're like, oh, speed, we have to have speed, whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay.
I do use
Good.
it on a relatively slow, at least compared to you guys, Canadian internet. And it seems really fast to me. Until the tweet came out, I was like, what are they talking about? It's like,
Yeah. Or it's like fast enough for you that you don't get frustrated. It may not be like as fast as Google Calendar or something, but you haven't noticed. So it's fast enough.
Right.
And I look forward to potentially next year's tweets from David about we're moving back to the cloud.
Yeah.
Or a mini cloud.
They'll be launching their own cloud.
Yeah.
Kamal Cloud. It's an interesting, the type of people who are really jumping on that bandwagon don't really ever think about building products. They're just in the code, and that's the only thing they care about or whatever. But it's like the whole philosophy of Rails is the one person framework, the small team framework, the go build a business and show off your Aston Martin Valkyrie and your Pagani Zonda and stuff on Instagram because you built a product people actually use and actually pay for.
I heard about all that stuff. I didn't watch any of it though. I probably won't either. It's just I'm not really
There's
interested in here. That's what, exactly. I'd
No
rather
good
just, like,
points.
it sounds like they could use a Matt's-esque character over there, maybe, or like a Minneswan slogan to make it a little
No,
more cheery
they
or
got
something.
that character, but the character is not about being nice. It's about
That's what I'm
shitting on
saying.
everybody else's stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
And they
need
don't
the other
want-
end of it.
But they don't want that. They chose what they wanted. They want to know that they are right. That's the thing they're always fighting for, which is why they don't have any like a web framework that's actually succeeded yet. Everybody's got their own, built it from scratch. But
Listen,
on the other hand, we are like all contribute to Rails or Laravel, and we're going and building products and businesses and all that stuff. And like we happen to use Rails to do this, but that's because it helps us build this stuff faster. But our real goal is to build things that people use. And that should be the focus, not just writing software for software's sake. It's like you're doing this for real people, for them,
true.
not for yourself.
Yeah.
But they're like very distracted with that because that's about the depth of their thought process. They see like, oh, it's slow. It could be faster. Yeah, no shit. But does that matter? To them, they're like, no, it's slow. That's it. This is as far as my thought process is going to go. No trade-offs, no considerations on that stuff, usually.
It's an interesting thing. A lot of folks are just used to getting things instantaneously, right? So it's like everything's about speed, speed, and speed. I've never been that person necessarily. Like I like to go fast on my skateboard, but that's about it. Like I don't need everything to feel super snappy because if it works for me, and I'm fine with that. So
You probably use Jira, don't you?
maybe I should if I don't.
Oh, man. I feel that way about, hey, if it's a good user experience, usually the actual time spent is going to be filling out that form, not waiting for the form to load. Waiting for the form to load could take 5 seconds. Not actually that big of a deal if I'm going to spend 2 minutes filling out that form. I'm thinking about who do I need to invite? Are we meeting in person, on Zoom, on Tuple, on whatever? What time is going to work for everybody? And it's
Yeah.
like, if you can have that offloaded and you can write that code a lot faster, then I would rather do that and have a little bit of slowness for that one tiny little interaction.
And if the form takes me 2 minutes to fill out, that's probably why I'm not using your product more so than the 5 or 10 seconds it took for the form to actually load.
Well, I mean, when you think about making a calendar invite, like there's a lot of decisions you make as you go. The software is not the problem, even though like it might have a lot of fields to fill out. They're all kind of optional in a calendar, but
Yeah.
when you're putting together a meeting, like there's a lot of it takes time to do that. Like the typical interaction is not going to be instant. It would make sense if you're in Discord and it takes a second for the reply box to show up every time you want to send a message. Sure, of course. But that's an interaction needs to be pretty instant or whatever.
Sure.
Like adding a calendar event that you're going to do like a couple times a day. It's not like you're making, 1,000 calendar events a day. Like you might make 1,000 messages in Campfire or Discord or Slack. And it's just common sense to me, which is funny. It doesn't seem like it's common sense to a certain crowd that working on these things and in deciding how often they happen and whatever, in deciding where to invest your engineering time. Very different reasonings there. But I don't think those people generally have ever like worked at a business where that mattered, like a small team where it matters a lot. They probably are employed and just get paid just to think about coding stuff and never get involved in anything outside of that, never talking to customers or anything, I would guess. So they probably have a very different perspective because they're not actually being involved in design or anything else. It's just, oh, you get paid to code. We already designed this feature, go build it. And it's like, oh, then I'll make it fast. That's my hunch.
It is fast. Like I was just doing it as you're talking, the Hey Calendar. I can't even see the loading. It's so fast. It's less than half a second to load.
Less than half a second.
It's like,
come back to me when it's less than half a millisecond.
It feels instant, like native. I don't know.
It was also the same argument when people were like, oh, let's use Phoenix and Elixir because the milliseconds that it takes to render a page with Rails is microseconds in Elixir. So like, of course, we should use that. It's faster. And it's like, okay, sure.
It's fast.
But I do think there are things where like, had Stimulus actually done more than kind of make a friendlier alternative to jQuery, if it actually added some abstractions to make a modal easier, then sure. But sort of the philosophy of Rails has been like, browser's pretty darn good. It has modals built in now and just use those, whatever, that kind of thing. So like those implementation details are starting to become something that's like native in the browser, that we don't have to slap 50 megabytes of JavaScript on our app to render stuff on the client side. It's trade-offs at any level of the stack, but you have to decide at a high level where like the three of us get to think about stuff on every level: support, design, implementation, the code, and what are the customers complaining about or confused about or whatever. Like we get to be involved in every level, and not enough people are actually writing code with that perspective there. I mean, it's easy to go work for a lot of companies and that you got 100 devs, like you're going to have somebody managing you, telling you what to do, and you're going to just be focused on the code. And as you get in a bigger and bigger company, like you're more and more specialized into, you're the button guy, or you're the modal guy. You just make slow modals in Rails.
I'm gonna go make slow buttons.
Yeah. Just add a little 30-second delay to every button.
Yeah,
I like it.
I don't think I'd ever want to work on a large team like that, to be honest. I never really have in the past. That just doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't sound like a good time,
That's how I was in college. It was like, oh man, these people work at Google. They're so smart. They're geniuses. They get paid so well. And it was like, I'd like to be one of those people. And then over time, you start to realize like they don't ever talk to their users. They're just stuck writing code that passes CI and whatever other measurements they've got and stuff. And it's like, when's the last time you talked to somebody, a developer that works on Gmail or Google Maps or whatever, doing customer research or whatever? No, that doesn't happen. They've got people for that. They got specialists that do that kind of stuff, if at all. And then it's like, on the other end of the spectrum, we get to do everything and see how the decision affects so many things, which I find really fun, because what got me into programming was like open source and seeing people use my code. And that became like the North Star of, hey, if people are using my stuff, then I'm having a lot of fun and I'm learning and I feel very fulfilled because I see people using my stuff. But if I just added like a little feature to Google Maps and that was my year's worth of work, it would be like, I don't really feel responsible for people using this stuff because they were already using Google Maps and we didn't invent anything new. We just added like the avoid tolls feature or some stupid thing, and it's like, it's not really me. It was the whole massive team of 1,000 people that work on Google Maps or whatever that really did it. I just got paid to go do that.
Right.
And it feels like you don't, to me, when you're at that scale, it would be like, I don't feel responsible for this failing or not because I just got paid to go build this, what you told me. There was no responsibility on, does it need to get a certain level of adoption? That would be my manager or the manager's job or whatever. And I would never get to do that stuff, which I really like what we do because we get to like go build notifications and then see, oh, wow, it turns out Rails community really wants a solution that's intuitive for notifications. And then all of a sudden Noticed has like 2,000 stars and it's nuts to see that. But we actually get to talk to everybody that has an issue or an idea or whatever and improve it for them, which is fun. I like that.
If it was faster, though, do you think it would have 4,000 stars?
Maybe at least 20,000, probably 10x.
We gotta make sure that widget's on before, including all the boot stuff.
Yeah, there you go. It's some fun, not so fun nonsense. Sometimes it's a good conversation because it's actually constructive and Theo got into a little bit of this. He plays that drama queen role a lot to get people to watch his streams and stuff. But like it's not wrong. Like he was talking about like the perspective of you have a spectrum of a blog that can be purely server side, doesn't really need any JavaScript. Hey is more towards the middle where yes, you do have to have JavaScript to interact with the calendar. And then there are things like, I don't know, Trello, Discord, whatever, tons of JavaScript, needs to always feel instantaneous because that's kind of the whole point of it. It's an instant chat service. But there's the spectrum and then deciding like where you want to fall on there, where you should fall may not today be where you actually fall. I'm sure Hey Calendar will ideally move in the long term to more of those instant interactions, but it's a brand new product, a small team. This is a good trade-off for the small team to actually ship the damn thing versus spending another year developing that and making all these things, whatever. And then they can actually get paid to continue working on it. So he doesn't really talk about that level of depth in it, but he does talk about like the expected interactivity of, at least from this chunk I watched. I didn't watch much of his stream, but the discourse on Twitter and whatnot was of similar vein where it's, yes, I get it. We all get it that some things it does feel better when it's instantaneous. When you click on this to add an event and it shows up right away. Rails can do that. It's not like it can't do it. That's the thing that he glosses over and it's like, oh, just because it doesn't currently, it's like Rails can never support this kind of stuff. That's nonsense. But they got to preach JavaScript and sell JavaScript, and that's what they're doing because that's the community they're in and represent and whatever. And so they're just poking nonsensical jabs at everyone else. But this is the stuff that sucks for people. Like when you hear Rails in the news, that's what you hear. Sure. Unfortunately.
This is why I'm not going to go watch it because it's going to bum me out. I know it already.
But this is the thing that we need to be loud and vocal about. Rails 7.2 added all this cool stuff. We should be hearing that. Look at all the new cool stuff in Rails 7.2. We should not be hearing that Rails is slow as the main topic of conversation. We should drown them out with the excitement that we have for our stuff. Because if you look at the Laravel community, they're drowning out any negativity with excitement and support and whatever. But we're kind of, as a Rails community, we're not drowning it out enough. So it ends up being kind of a loud discourse of negativity at some level. But it's also hard to make those arguments and you can't convince them that they're wrong. They will never believe that. They will always know that faster modals are faster. And it's like, well, yes, faster modals are faster. That's by definition, but doesn't mean we need the faster modals.
it's fast enough.
You got to drown them out with the opposite conversation, which is like, your point is irrelevant. I made this much money building a product instead of making a faster modal. That's what David was posting about his cars. And hey, none of that stuff matters. Look at Toby. He built $1 billion business on Rails. Look at where you check in all of your code. It's on Rails, on GitHub. That's the actual story that matters, not GitHub speed of modals. Hell, you maybe shouldn't even need modals. Maybe that's the argument.
There you go.
Like,
Ooh.
no modals is better.
What's the name of that website that says something about modals?
Yeah.
I forget what it is.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
forget. That's such a great website.
I do not like modals.
Well, we can't have you on the podcast then. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I could rant about this. People have been ranting about it for a long time. It's just not constructive. So it's like, it's hard to tune them out, but we do need to be more vocal about the cool stuff we're doing. It happens at Rails World and whatnot, but it's not often enough. We don't need that more throughout the year or whatever. Because that's also the hard thing is if you're starting a company and you're going to need to hire engineers, you start looking at the state of Rails and you see that Rails is slow and people are like dogging on it, then maybe that'll say somebody whose new business is not started on Rails and they pick JavaScript or whatever else for it instead, when they probably were better off picking Rails, but they're just worried about the future because people are not being loud and supportive.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. You know how we don't want to have politics in programming? This is our politics in programming.
That's fair.
This is unfortunate, but it does exist. But we can do better,
Yeah.
be more supportive and whatnot. Spread
Yep.
the gospel.
And go watch Arena's Rails Comp talk where she talked about
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
But we also have to just continue that same message to the community so that if it's always top of mind, then it helps to not be forgotten and whatnot. So we got to keep doing that. That's our jobs. They took our gerbs. All right, gentlemen, this was fun. And I would rather be outside.
Oh, it is. Not me. It's raining here big time. Again.
Will you stay inside and fix any other bugs in Rails 7.2 beta and then cut the release candidate for me when you can?
Done. No problem.
Got it. Thanks. I will talk to you guys in like 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, this sounds good.
This is just like a regular meeting for us where we're all talking about the future. Not quite, but.
Echoing the same things for sure.
All right, gentlemen.
Cool.
Talk soon.
Absolutely.